Welcome back to New Realities. I'm Alan Steinfeld, and this is an excerpt from an interview I did with John Ramirez, ex-CIA agent, about the only unclassified meeting he attended as an officer of the CIA where they revealed what they knew about UFOs. So there may be more meetings, but this is the only one that John attended, and some great insights that he's offering us here. Thanks for watching.
I know what the interest was within the US government. I definitely know what the interest was in an adversarial government. And so putting everything together and putting the one unclassified briefing I got, which I can't prove it happened, that was the one I alluded to in the hotel room. I can give you the address. It's 960 Chain Bridge Road in McLean, Virginia. There's two hotels there, and there's a Marriott there. And in that Marriott, before 9/11 occurred and after the year 2000 occurred, because Y2K was done and 9/11 didn't happen yet. Sometime in that time frame, we met, and there was a representative from the chief scientist of the CIA, and there was a representative from the historical staff of CIA, and together they briefed on the UFO issue as the CIA saw it from the very beginning, 1947 and onward. And
you weren't part of that. Were you part of that briefing?
Yeah, I was invited to that. It was unclassified.
It is classified, you're saying?
Unclassified.
That whole meeting is unclassified.
Yeah, there were CIA officers there, and there were also members of academia. There was a sign-in sheet, and the folks from academia, they signed their email addresses .edu. And all of us govies sign our email addresses ending the domain .gov. So that's who.
So how many people were there? How many people?
We filled up a conference room, I would say not more than 3 dozen.
And
probably less.
And why were you invited to that?
I to this day do not know. The gentleman that invited me was from the office of the chief scientist. It's a gentleman that I worked with on other projects. He was aware of my interest because on my desk, I did have a plush toy, I would call it, of a traditional gray, except the plush toy was green. And I would fold the little gray being in a way that he could sit on top of my Dell monitor. And so my interest in this entire topic was well known. And he invited me to this. And I also recognize another gentleman I personally knew from my home office, and knowing this gentleman's past work in my home office, I determined that he needed to be there. But there's very few people I recognize other than 2 individuals that were sponsoring the meeting, and those other 2 gentlemen.
I never heard about that meeting, actually. And is there a record of that meeting?
Absolutely not. I threw the record away. It was unclassified. The agenda was published unclassified. Usually, if it's a classified document, it can be unclassified. If it's classified, it doesn't matter. At top to bottom, there's something called portion marking and labeling, and they're labeled top and bottom unclassified. And this didn't even have that as unclassified. And so they handed it to us. There was no security officer there. I could carry my cell phone into the conference room. It's not a skiff. That's your biggest clue that it was unclassified. It's not a skiff. There's no security officer checking badges. I never showed my badge. I pocketed my badge. No one wore badges. And then there's a discussion about, 1947 to current times, discussion about craft that we're seeing before, that 10% of the records of craft being seen in US skies are actually extra or non-terrestrial, I use the word extraterrestrial, but actually UFO craft, non-terrestrial craft, 10%. And they also talked about the fact that when the human genome was sequenced, that they had a high interest in alien DNA, which implies to me that they went back, if there is a body or bodies, or there are tissue samples, that they were able to then use the technology later for human genome sequencing to go back to something they held and make the statement, according to this officer, that the US government has been interested in human DNA since the end of World War II.
Wait, let me just
alien
understand
DNA.
that. They are you saying that when the human genome was sequenced, they may have, as the illusion, found extraterrestrial DNA within the human genome? Is that what they were implying?
Other side, other way. You're
Oh,
missing, we're
oh,
missing
tell
just
me.
one part of it. The
What's
side
that?
we're missing is they use the technology when acquired, they use the technology
Oh,
to go back to look at perhaps bodies, perhaps samples of tissue. And then they notice, knowing that we sequenced human DNA already, the human genome, knowing that, oh my gosh, there's sequences in there that are similar in humans. Why is that?
oh, 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 oh.
And then further, according to this briefing that was unclassified, that I told the pre-classification review board, this is what I know, that they also said that there's a high interest in certain familial lines, that is, in certain generational lines of people on the planet now, that they carry this added enhancement, this alien DNA added enhancement in their human genome. It's passed from generation to generation. So that was what was revealed to me. And the third part of this meeting was the future from the perspective of 2000, 2001, keeping that in mind. Then in the future, there'll be devices that you can hold in your hand to access all of this information and other information globally, all over the world. There will be a huge amount of technology accessible to people, and they will be able to get this information through this technology. They'll be like sharing information both visually and through audio, like we're doing now, talking about everything, not just this, but everything. And we want to make that happen. That is, the intelligence community want to facilitate that to happen.
Well, that is so unusual. Is there a name for this meeting? This or no? And it's just something,
I
because
don't
I never
remember the
heard
name.
you. I've never heard you talk about this. And
Yeah, in various interviews, I've had to address this.
okay,
Again, not only was the agenda unclassified, so was the sign-up sheet. I had both in my possession because I could carry it. There was nothing classified about it. No one stopped me from taking it out. I noticed that some other people were left the meeting with both in hand, the academics. And I wish I had that sign-up sheet, because it will show you who in academia with .edu domain names is privy to this type of information.
yes, I
That would be
wonder
a
if it's
treasure
online.
mine.
And it's not. What did you recognize any of the academics there?
No, I didn't. No, I just
That's
recognized the two CIA officers attending with me as audience members, and the two CIA officers on stage.
right. And who
Who
were the? You
sponsored
know,
the
I
meeting.
don't. I guess you can't give us the names of the people on
Absolutely
stage,
not.
but
Absolutely not.
I know that's okay. I'm not. I'm not asking for them, but how do you think they accumulated that all that information from 1947 to the genome to the future? What is their resources for having had that knowledge?
So they're CIA officers classified at top secret SCI. So that information is in top secret SCI. And it was determined that there's certain pieces of information that they felt like they could share in an unclassified world. And so they did so. Now,
That's
this type of
interesting.
information is what in the Executive Order 13556, that's known as unclassified, controlled unclassified information. So it's unclassified information I just told you, but there's certain parts of the government who wish that to be controlled. So why do they have CUI? They should get rid of it, my opinion. But,
all right. Well, that's correct. Thank you for that little piece, because I wasn't aware. And that's basically all you ever heard from the CIA about UFOs,
no,
UAP.
the others I said about what I know about what other countries
right.
have investigated, have researched. The only thing I can say, because it was stated in the public domain on the Russian side, that there was a major general in the Russian Air Force, I believe his name is Vasily Alexeyev. He stated in the Russian press that the Soviet government and the Russian government had a program to work with these UFOs, UAPs, to lure them to the ground so that they can have encounters with the craft. And I don't know if you mentioned occupants. I don't know if everyone came out of the craft. And so here's this Russian major general. Do I believe him? Yes. Why? Because I saw something like that. So I can say that he should be believed.
Well, thank you, John. Thank you for, revealing more truth. There probably were other meetings that maybe you just weren't invited to, possibly on the subject, or
I disinvited myself to several meetings.
Why didn't you want to know? Why did you just invite yourself?
I didn't need to know. Already had what I need to know, and it didn't serve me to get into the programmatic details. I sent 2 engineers to the orb working group.
And, there was an orb meeting. There was an orb.
Yeah, that preceded by a few years, the ALSAP. If you think of ALSAP being thought of in 2007 and actually implemented in 2008, this occurred long before that.
So Lakovsky may have been at that meeting, Lakovsky.
I don't know, because I didn't attend. I wasn't there. He was a GS-13 when that meeting occurred, when that working group was in operation.
So you're saying the CIA had a working group about orbs? No?
Not the CIA, the intelligence community.
Oh, the intelligence community. Not I get
it was a DNI, ODNI working group.
I
CIA was a participating member, and there were other agencies and contractors participating members.
Is that information still top secret about what they talked about at those meetings?
Absolutely. That's the other thing I can't say.
That is interesting, though. I mean, that's
the fact of is less sensitive. The fact that something occurred is less sensitive. The contents of what occurred is what's sensitive.
Oh, I wonder.
So so you hear fact of, that's all that, like Lou Elizondo, he talks a lot about the fact of that something occurred, the fact of that this is occurring, the fact of that something will be occurring in the future. He can talk about, but when you ask him about the contents, he will rely on his non-disclosure agreements. If you ask anybody who is associated with this from the government side about the contents of what's in what can't be disclosed, they won't answer that. But the fact that something is of that nature, they can talk about.
So when these NDAs, or whatever that legislation proclaims is passed into law, the fact that there won't be retribution, could people from those orb meetings come forward and say, this is what was talked about at the meeting?
No, because they're in a compartment that still exists.
Oh, so even with this whistleblower legislation, they cannot come forward?
Absolutely not. That's not whistleblowing. That's releasing unauthorized release of classified information under the Espionage Act of the United States. They won't do that unless they want to go to jail.
I see.
There's a mechanism to release it, and that's what I'm stressing. There's now a mechanism where that can be released by the government, because they're looking at every NDA. Congress wants the Department of Defense and the intelligence community to look at every NDA associated with these aerospace undersea phenomena and justify why those NDAs are there to Congress behind closed doors. So there's some accountability happening, which is why the Comptroller General is in charge of making sure it happens. He's the accountability officer for Congress. He's the watchdog of Congress. He can legally compel the Secretary of Defense and the DNI to comply with these provisions in U.S. law now.
He can, but will he? Who is the Comptroller General right now?
I don't know his name, but I looked up his name and I forgot it. It starts with
okay.
an
I looked it up too.
Guess what? It's been in office since 2008.
Right. And
since 2008. And so he's still in office now. It's not a political position. You can't threaten him for losing his job because he won't lose his job. I guess Congress, he works for Congress. Congress can fire him.
But will he reinforce? You say he can, and it's his job, but will that happen?
Well, if he wants to comply with U.S. law, he will, because U.S. law says that that's his job now. That's one of his jobs. He does a lot of things in terms of oversight of the government. He does a lot of things as the watchdog of Congress. Now, what they did was to put this entire UAP issue under his umbrella of responsibilities. And if he wants to comply with US law, he will do it. And he's going to make sure that the other folks comply with US law as well.
But is it law yet, or is it about to be passed into law?
No, usually the NDAA gets passed in December of every year. And the IAA gets blended into a bigger bill called the Consolidated Appropriations Act. And so the most current NDAA was passed on December 27, 2021. And the current IAA was passed as part of this Consolidated Appropriations Act on March 15, 2022. So
let's just clarify. The National Defense Authorization Act is the NDAA, and what's the relation to the Intelligence Authorization Act? How are they connected?
They're connected in this way. There's some overlap there. The NDAA is mostly what we call Title 10, or the Armed Forces of the United States. The Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, Air Force, and now Space Force.
Right.
That's the NDAA. And the NDAA, there's some overlap, because not only does the Department of Defense have its intelligence agencies, those agencies are also shared on the ODNI side.
Mm-hmm. So
if you take NSA, NSA is both a Department of Defense intelligence agency and also a ODNI intelligence agency. And you go right down the line, except for CIA. CIA is the only independent intelligence agency. The only independent, never answer to the Secretary of Defense.
Oh, really?
Secretary of Defense can ask us questions, and we will happy to respond to his questions in helping him understand intelligence that his side may have collected.
But it does answer the controller, right? CIA would answer to the
every piece of the government answers to the controller.
Okay, comptroller.
The comptroller, yeah. You don't want to be hauled up before the comptroller, because then that means that you're not doing something right.
Right. Well, this has been really a great insight into the workings of government and what it needs. Is there anything else you could say about that 2000 CIA meeting in the year 2001 that really shocked and surprised you?
Nothing shocked and surprised me, really, because I was a believer going into CIA, had these lifetime experiences since I was small, have been taken aboard craft, have been medically examined by visitors, for lack of a better term. So none of that surprised me at all.
Would you say you're an abductee?
No, I was taken. I wanted to be taken. Abductee implies non-compliance, non-voluntary.
And that does exist. I mean,
that does exist. But for me, the only disappointment I have is that they brought me back. Okay. I didn't want to come back.
Well, you were conscious the whole time that these things happened to you.
I perceived them as something that I was conscious of. There's tactile feeling. I was conscious of it. Whether they apply covering memories, I know many of experiencers say, I saw them and then they turned into something else. It could have been a covering memory or whatnot. But for that experience, I had markings on my body that I didn't have before that experience. And I had other experiences where they left markings on my body.
Wow.
And then there's a whole discussion about implants that is a whole nother.
Well, we're going to do a show on
discussion.
Let's do a whole discussion about your experiences, maybe along with some other contactees, and we can just compare notes, and maybe you'll be contacted again. But it feels like this work you're doing, sharing with the public, may have been instigated by some of that contact experience. The fact that you're opening people's minds now because you're one of the people who understands the inside of things.
Right. It could be the purpose for my sightings of orbs and my contact experiences, that it will lead to the position I'm in within government, that I sought this type of position. And now it's time to share what I know. And I'm doing that as best I can.
Well, and you're a patriot and someone who's standing up for the truth. And, you're very aware of the framing of government, what you're allowed to say and what you're not. And you've done a great job making us aware of what's possible and the fact that we might see a real change happening in the world. So
That's my aspiration, that there will be real change, and it will ultimately, because none of this would matter unless change happens.
thanks, and stay in touch with any updates from legislation and everything that might change our position in this understanding of the phenomena.
Well, thank you for having me, Alan. It's been a
Of course,
pleasure.
John, thanks for coming back. I'm Alan Steinfeld talking to John Ramirez, ex-officer from the CIA, who's not revealing anything he can't say, just revealing what he can say. And it's been very much appreciated. So thank you everyone online for watching. We had a good audience here, and John, we'll be in touch.